Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise to get to the heart of complex procedures.
Today we're digging into a really fascinating corner of patent law.
We're in Chapter 2500 of the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure, the MPP, which is all about maintenance fees.
And our focus today is very specific. Section 2575, titled Notices.
And this is where it gets interesting, because this section details all the ways the USPTO will try to communicate with you about your patent deadlines.
But, and this is the crucial part, it also explains why you fundamentally cannot rely on any of it.
That's the puzzle we're unpacking today. The USPTO sends out these courtesy notices, but the legal risk, all of it, 100% of it, stays with you, the patent owner.
The stakes are incredibly high. You miss a payment, your patent can just expire. And the MPP is, let's say, brutally honest about this.
How so?
It states very clearly that the absence of a notice, a delay in receiving one, or even an incorrect notice from the USPTO can never be used as an excuse for not paying on time.
So they're just suggestions. Friendly reminders with no legal weight.
Think of it like a calendar alert from a friend. It's helpful, sure, but if your phone is off and you miss the appointment, the consequences are still yours.
It's the ultimate lesson in self-reliance in patent law.
It really is.
So let's start with that foundation, the legal burden. Why is the USPTO completely off the hook for notifying someone about a deadline for what could be a multi-million-dollar asset?
Well, it all comes down to the law itself. 35 U.S.C. 41B, to be exact. The statute says the office has no legal duty to send alerts. Their job is just to collect the fees.
And the law sets the schedule.
Right. The law sets the schedule, and the patentee is simply expected to know it, or, more realistically, to docket it properly.
And we're not talking about a one-time payment here. It's a series of them.
Exactly. It's a progressive system. It's designed to make you reevaluate your patent's value at key moments.
Can you walk us through those milestones?
Sure. So there are 3 main deadlines. And for each one, a 6-month payment window opens up beforehand, so you have plenty of time.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first payment is due at 3 years and 6 months after the patent grant date.
And the fee for that is $980.
Then the second one comes at 7 years and 6 months.
And that one jumps to $2,480.
And the final one is at 11 years and 6 months post-grant.
For $4,110. So
Yeah.
It's a serious financial commitment that grows over time.
It is. And if you miss any of those deadlines, your patent doesn't die immediately. It enters a 6-month grace period.
But you have to pay extra, right?
Oh, yeah. You can still make the payment, but it comes with a mandatory surcharge.
This all sounds straightforward enough, but this is where we run into what you call the weekend expiration trap.
Yes. This is one of those procedural details that can really catch people off guard. It's all about the difference between the legal clock and the administrative clock.
Explain that.
Okay, so let's say the absolute last day of your 6-month grace period lands on a Saturday.
Right. The office is closed.
Correct. So the rules say you can make that payment on the next business day, which would be the Monday.
That sounds like a pretty standard bit of administrative relief. So what's the trap?
The trap is that while the payment deadline gets pushed to Monday, the patent's legal expiration date does not move an inch.
Wait, say that again?
Your patent is legally considered expired as of midnight on Saturday. The Monday payment is just an administrative window to reverse an expiration that has, legally speaking, already happened.
So if my grace period ends on a Saturday, and for some reason I don't pay on that Monday, when did my patent actually lapse?
It lapsed after midnight on Saturday. You're now dealing with a patent that's been expired for 2 days.
Wow. So your docketing system can't just track payment dates.
It absolutely cannot. You have to track the hard legal expiration date, not the administrative convenience of when you can pay. That distinction is, it's what costs people millions.
So let's talk about the notices themselves. If we can't rely on them, why does the MPEP bother detailing them in Section 2575? What's their purpose?
Well, they do serve a purpose. It's just not a legal one. It's about transparency and, being a helpful reminder. They break down into a few different types.
Okay, let's start at the beginning of the patent's life. What's first?
Those are the standard notices.
And what are they?
They're the earliest alert you'll get. You'll see them right in your Notice of Allowance and on the patent grant itself.
So they're not reminding you of a specific date coming up soon?
Not at all. They're just flagging that these fees will be due down the road. It's the trigger to get it into your docketing system in the first place.
Okay, what comes next?
Next, you have something more public. The official Gazette notices.
I've heard of the official Gazette, but I think a lot of people overlook it.
They do, but it's the official public record. The Gazette periodically publishes lists of patents that are hitting their 3.5, 7.5, and 11.5 year anniversaries.
Marking the opening of their payment windows.
Exactly. And it also reports which patents have expired for non-payment and which ones have been reinstated.
So the Gazette is really less for the patent owner and more for the public. For, say, competitors.
You've got it. It's all about public transparency. If a competitor wants to know if your patent is still in force, they should be checking the Gazette.
Got it. Now, what about the notices that actually show up in your mailbox? The direct correspondence.
Right, the maintenance fee reminder.
The one everyone thinks of. What's the timing on that?
And the timing is so important here. These reminders are usually mailed out after the 6-month grace period has already begun.
So by the time you get that letter, you're already late.
You are. You're already in the surcharge period. It's really a last-ditch warning before the patent expires for good.
And this brings us to another potential point of failure. The mailing address.
A huge one. The MPPP is very specific. The notices go to the fee address that's on file.
And that's different from the regular correspondence address.
It can be. This is where so many people trip up. A company moves, where they change law firms, and they update their correspondence address for active cases. But they forget to separately update the designated fee address for their granted patents.
So that last chance reminder just goes into a black hole.
It goes into the void. And when the patent expires and the owner says, "But I never got the notice," the USPTO's response is always the same.
That's a problem with your docketing, not ours.
Exactly. Failure to receive a reminder is never, ever an excuse.
Okay, so let's move into that worst-case scenario. The patent lapses. What's the mechanism for fixing what sounds like a catastrophic failure?
Well, the bar for fixing it is, as you can imagine, incredibly high. You have to file a petition to have the patent reinstated.
And what's the standard for that?
The standard is that the delay in payment must have been unintentional.
Unintentional. That sounds like a legal term of art, not just, oops, I forgot.
It is, and you have to prove it. The petition requires a few things. First, the late maintenance fee itself, obviously.
Plus the surcharge.
Plus the surcharge. Second, you have to pay a separate petition fee.
And I saw something interesting here. You need a separate petition fee for each missed payment.
Yes. So if you somehow missed both the 7.5 and the 11.5 year fees, you're paying both back maintenance fees plus 2 surcharges plus 2 separate petition fees.
You're essentially paying 2 fines just for the privilege of asking to have your patent reinstated.
Precisely. And then comes the most important part. The statement that the delay was unintentional. And if the delay has been more than 2 years, you need to provide a lot more detail, facts, and circumstances to back that up.
I assume they're trying to weed out people who intentionally let it lapse, maybe to save money while they waited to see if a product would be successful.
That is the core distinction. I forgot because our docketing system crashed. That might be unintentional. I waited to pay because we were hedging our bets. That's strategic, and that is not unintentional.
Okay, so let's say you succeed. You convince the director it was unintentional, you pay all the fees, and the patent is reinstated. Is everything back to normal? Are there any lasting consequences?
Oh, there are massive consequences. This is probably the biggest risk of all.
What is it?
The patent becomes subject to intervening rights.
Intervening rights. That sounds bad.
It's a commercial disaster. Basically, it means that if a third party, say, a competitor, started making or selling your invention during the period when your patent was lapsed.
When they reasonably thought it was in the public domain.
Exactly. They may acquire the right to continue those activities even after your patent is brought back to life.
You're kidding. So even if I fix my mistakes, I might have just given my competitor a free legal license to infringe?
It's a balancing act. The law doesn't want to punish someone for relying on the public record that you, the patent owner, created by failing to pay your fees.
So to summarize, reinstatement fixes the patent, but it doesn't erase the commercial damage done while it was lapsed.
That's a perfect way to put it. You get your patent back, but you may have permanently lost your exclusivity against certain parties. It's an incredibly costly fix.
Just quickly, before we wrap up, what if a patent has been reissued or gone through re-examination? Does that reset the maintenance fee clock?
No, not at all. That's a great question. The clock is always tied to the grant date of the original patent. A reissue or a re-exam certificate doesn't change that schedule one bit.
The original grant date is the anchor for everything.
It's the immovable date.
This whole deep dive into MPEP PAL 75 really just hammers home one single point, doesn't it?
It does. Proactive, redundant, diligent docketing is everything.
The USPTO notices are helpful signals, maybe, but they can't be your system. They are not the legal clock.
You have to understand these rules not just as deadlines, but as a form of catastrophic risk management. Your entire system has to be built on the assumption that the USPTO's notice will fail.
Which leaves us with our final thought for you, the listener. If the hard legal expiration can happen silently on a Saturday, what specific, non-negotiable, triple redundancy check does your organization have to ensure that fee is paid and recorded before that silent clock runs out, instead of just relying on the administrative grace period of paying on Monday?
That's the question every patent owner needs to answer.
We would like to extend a special thank you to Mike Shepard, the creative director who organized this entire audio series. His efforts have helped make these educational summaries possible for inventors, students, and professionals who wish to better understand the structure and logic of U.S. patent procedures.
Disclaimer. This summary of the MPEP was generated using AI tools, including ChatGPT and Notebook LM, and may contain errors or omissions. It is provided for general educational and informational purposes only, and is not legal advice or a substitute for formal instruction. For authoritative guidance, consult the official MPEP, a qualified instructor, or a registered patent practitioner.